For years, the world saw a picture-perfect family, faith-filled, united, and unbreakable. But behind the gospel music, the public prayers, and the spotlight smiles, a painful truth was quietly unraveling. Now, Tamela Mann's daughter is breaking her silence, and what she's revealing has left fans heartbroken and stunned. In a shocking turn of events, she claims her mother's suffering wasn't just ignored, it was exploited. As the woman who brought gospel into countless homes fought privately for her life, her husband was allegedly profiting from her pain. This is more than a family rift. This is a reckoning. Tamela Mann's silent struggle. The gospel empire. Built on her pain. For decades, the Mann family represented the image of perfect gospel unity, a family deeply rooted in faith, laughter, love, and music. From their wholesome appearances on stage to their viral TikToks and beloved television shows, they became the embodiment of what many Black Christian families aspired to be. David Mann, known for his role as the comedic and lovable Mr. Brown, was not only a gospel entertainer but also a husband and business partner to powerhouse vocalist Tamela Mann. Together, they built a ministry meets entertainment empire that seemed untouchable. But according to David's daughter, Portia Mann, the truth behind the smiles in Scripture may be far darker than anyone imagined. In a heart-wrenching, deeply personal revelation, Portia has come forward with stunning allegations against the man she once called father. A man she now claims is the reason her mother, Tamela, is lying silent and immobile in an ICU bed. Her accusation is more than a cry for attention. It is a desperate plea to expose a pattern of emotional neglect, spiritual manipulation, and silent suffering hidden beneath years of gospel glory. The illusion of perfection, matching outfits, and masked pain. The Mann family had long been seen as the blueprint for gospel royalty. Audiences loved their matching church outfits, family prayer vlogs, and feel-good family comedy specials. Their union was marketed as a testimony, proof that faith and love could conquer all. For women in the church, Tamela Mann was more than just a singer. She was a symbol of strength, resilience, and unwavering devotion. Her performances of soul-stirring ballads like "Take Me to the King" left congregations in tears. She ministered not only through her voice but through her walk, both figuratively and literally. So when Tamela suddenly shed 200 pounds and re-emerged with a dramatically slimmer figure, the gospel world erupted in applause. She was praised for her discipline, her faith journey, and her divine transformation. Churches invited her to speak about health and healing. Wellness tours were booked. Blogs claimed that God had done a mighty work in her life. But according to Portia, nothing about that transformation was holy. It was pain, masked as purpose. And it came with a physical and emotional toll few knew about. Beneath the surface, a voice, stripped by hustle and control. What the public celebrated as a miraculous journey was, in Portia's words, a harrowing descent into physical collapse. Tamela's weight loss wasn't solely about health. It was driven by performance demands, cosmetic pressure, and behind-the-scenes coercion. Portia claims that her mother, despite her deep love for ministry, was often too exhausted to stand, much less perform, but was pushed back onto stages anyway. Her cries for rest were often met with business deadlines. When she said, "I can't," she was told, "We can't cancel." Portia, who grew up observing her mother's unwavering dedication, began to notice that the lines between ministry and exploitation were blurring. Behind those smiling Instagram photos were injections, prescription cocktails, and a body that was slowly shutting down. One nurse close to the family revealed Tamela was receiving high-grade medications designed to suppress pain and fight inflammation so she could perform, even when her body was screaming for mercy. There were moments so severe, so traumatic, that they defied reason. In one such instance, Tamela reportedly collapsed backstage. Her pulse disappeared for 13 agonizing seconds. While the official statement attributed it to low blood sugar, Portia calls it what it really was: a code blue. And yet, within 24 hours, her mother's image was plastered across concert posters and digital flyers. The show didn't stop. The machine, what Portia now calls a ministry disguised as a money mill, never slowed down. The brand was too valuable, the schedule too packed, and the audience too devoted. Tamela's health became a line item in a spreadsheet. Her pain was productized, and Portia had seen enough. An ICU revelation between healing and harm. It was not the stage or the sanctuary where the most pivotal moment of Tamela Mann's life occurred. It was in a sterile ICU room where the gospel icon lay unconscious, stripped of her strength, her voice, and her agency. Tamela had undergone a complex and deeply invasive nerve regeneration procedure coupled with spinal reinforcement surgery, both of which demanded extensive rest and presented sobering risks. Her medical team issued urgent warnings. Any premature movement, any unnecessary stress could result in organ failure. But while her body was confined and her voice silenced, the machinery of her name, her brand, continued its business uninterrupted. Marketing emails landed in inboxes. Her face adorned ads for detox teas, scripture-branded weight loss kits, and even a new virtual gospel choir platform. She had not approved any of it. She couldn't. And that realization would become the beginning of a far deeper unraveling. At her bedside, Portia Mann sat silently, her mother's hand in hers, her own body weary from sleeping upright in hospital chairs. She had fasted, she had prayed, and she had waited. While others posted on social media about faith and favor, she sat with the painful reality that the woman who once belted out anthems of hope was now voiceless and completely dependent. As the days blurred together, Portia started asking questions, not just of the medical team, but of the business. What she discovered was a web of authorizations, endorsements, and licensing agreements that appeared to have been enacted through a power of attorney clause. And at the center of it all stood David Mann, Tamela's husband, longtime creative partner, and the man Portia had once lovingly called Dad. In this new light, that title felt different. When business becomes betrayal. For years, Portia had remained publicly loyal to her family. Though David Mann was not her biological father, she had honored his role in her life and in the industry. He had been a stabilizing presence in the sprawling Mann gospel empire, which included films, music, comedy, cooking shows, and tours. But the woman in the hospital bed was not a character or a brand. She was a mother, a wife, a worshiper. And what Portia now saw wasn't protection, it was monetization. Tamela's likeness had been used in marketing materials and product partnerships while she was incapacitated. The contracts Portia reviewed appeared to be signed or executed through outdated or ethically questionable legal mechanisms. Some decisions, she learned, had been made in closed-door meetings with management and PR strategists, none of which had included Tamela's current medical team or Portia herself. This wasn't simply a question of legality, it was a question of humanity. Was Tamela a partner or a product? A woman or a platform? Portia saw her mother not just being overlooked, but being exploited. It was a gospel empire that ran as though the matriarch had never left the room, never fallen ill, never lost her voice. The public saw smiling images, glowing devotionals, and tweets about upcoming announcements. But behind those posts was a hospital monitor and a woman who couldn't open her eyes. When Portia confronted the family's PR and management team, the response was chillingly corporate. "We didn't want to panic the public." That phrase rang in her ears like a siren. Panic the public? Tamela wasn't a campaign to be protected. She was a woman who might not survive. Portia realized then that her mother's legacy wasn't just being maintained, it was being mined. Her pain had been reframed as strategy, her stillness treated like a marketing opportunity. The gospel hustle, faith, image, and exhaustion. Portia's heartbreak wasn't born from rebellion. It wasn't vengeance. It was grief. Grief for a woman who had given her life to ministry, only to be consumed by it. She had watched the toll it took on Tamela for years. The back-to-back tours. The expectation to always smile, always sing, always show up, even when she was in pain, even when her body begged for rest. In the gospel industry, exhaustion is often disguised as devotion. Burnout becomes sacrifice. Silence becomes obedience. The unspoken rule is simple. Keep going, keep believing, and keep performing. If you break, break quietly. But Portia had reached her breaking point. When she publicly accused David Mann of neglecting Tamela's pleas for rest and instead prioritizing the business machine, the response from the gospel community was swift and divided. Some accused her of tearing the family apart. Others whispered their support in private, afraid to risk their own connections. One insider warned her bluntly, "You'll destroy everything we've built." But Porsche had already seen enough destruction. She had watched her mother's spirit drained by obligations that masqueraded as blessings. She had seen faith weaponized to push Tamela beyond her body's limits. Meetings were still happening. Deals were still closing. Her mother's recovery was being scheduled around product launches. While Tamela lay voiceless in the ICU, Portia described media teams crafting comeback narratives. Whiteboards lined with potential dates, arcs for public reappearance, sponsored recovery stories. Porsche wasn't invited into any of those meetings. Her role was to stay quiet, to pray, and to keep the image intact. A daughter's reckoning with silence. What made Porsche finally speak was not rebellion. It was a refusal to accept silence as love. She saw clearly what many refused to admit. Tamela had become a commodity. Not intentionally, perhaps, but gradually, over time, in a system that rewards appearances over authenticity, it happened. Porsche knew her mother's heart. She had seen it up close. How Tamela agonized over the call to ministry, how deeply she loved people, how earnestly she prayed that her songs would heal. But somewhere along the journey, that sincerity had been packaged, stamped, and monetized. When Portia spoke out publicly, it wasn't just a family crisis. It was a cultural indictment. The gospel industry had allowed it to happen. The same pastors who had wept during Tamela's concerts now offered no comment. The same gospel platforms that had once heralded her as God's vessel now quietly shifted their focus to newer names. Silence, in the face of such suffering, became complicity. No one wanted to question Mr. Brown. No one wanted to challenge the Mann family's image. But Porsche no longer cared about appearances. She wanted the truth to matter more than the myth. The woman behind the voice. What Porsche wanted, more than anything, was for the world to remember who Tamela really was. Not the face on a flyer, not the voice in a playlist, but the woman who still called her children every night, who cried before performances because she never wanted the spotlight more than she wanted God's will. She wanted people to remember the Tamela who prayed with strangers after concerts. The Tamela who cooked Sunday dinners even after traveling across states. The Tamela who stayed soft in a world that demanded performance. Tamela had spent decades telling the world that God was a healer. And now, Portia found herself holding on to that same promise, but with no script, no lighting, no audience. Just the quiet hum of hospital machines and the echo of worship lyrics that once brought millions to tears. This time, it was personal. This time, it wasn't a song. It was a plea. The legacy reimagined, truth before image. As Tamela Mann fights for her life and begins the long journey of recovery, her legacy stands at a crossroads. Not because of scandal, but because of revelation. The truth that Porsche brought into the light has not just shaken a family. It has exposed a pattern within the gospel world itself, where branding often takes precedence over boundaries, where exhaustion is misread as excellence, where control is cloaked in scripture. Porsche's bravery may fracture the picture-perfect narrative, but it might also ignite the kind of reformation the gospel community desperately needs. One where artists are allowed to rest, one where honesty is met with healing, not rejection. One where a woman's health matters more than her hashtag. Tamela Mann, the woman who once lifted the world with her songs, is now the subject of a deeper conversation, one that demands we ask harder questions. Do we care more about the message than the messenger? Are we willing to see the soul behind the sound? The breaking point, a daughter's cry for truth. For over 2 decades, the Mann family stood as one of the most admired dynasties in contemporary gospel culture. At its heart was Tamela Mann, a voice that could thunder through cathedral walls and soothe like balm on a weary soul. Her gospel ballads, such as Take Me to the King, became anthems in homes, churches, and hospital rooms alike. Her public image, carefully cultivated through television shows, red carpet appearances, and branded weight loss journeys conveyed a narrative of triumph over adversity, joy rooted in faith, and a picture-perfect Christian marriage. But behind the polished smiles and worship lyrics was a woman quietly enduring a storm her fans were never meant to see, a storm her daughter, Tamela Mann, could no longer ignore. For years, Portia had remained in the shadows, holding the family line even as her mother's physical health deteriorated. She watched helplessly as Tamela's spine weakened, her gait faltered, and her once commanding presence began to fade. And when it became clear that silence was no longer an act of loyalty but complicity, Portia's voice cracked open the illusion with heartbreaking urgency. The world first heard the raw truth in a short, unfiltered Instagram video. Portia seated alone in her car, face swollen with tears, hands trembling as she held her phone. The words poured out, devoid of PR polish. "This legacy ain't worth my mama's life." Her voice broke not from drama but exhaustion. She revealed what many close to the family had suspected but feared to confirm: the blackout and the blogs that went silent. What followed was not the cascade of media attention one might expect in the aftermath of such a revelation. Instead, a haunting silence settled over the gospel media space. Not a single post from Praise Nation, Church and Shade, or even the Anointed Tea, a gossip site usually hungry for controversy within the church world. This silence felt calculated, not coincidental. These were the same outlets that had breathlessly chronicled Tamela's weight loss milestones, her cookbook launch, and her fitness routines. Her transformation story had been presented as a beacon of faith and self-discipline, a gospel Cinderella tale of mind, body, and spirit wellness. So where was that same energy now, when her condition was deteriorating? The answer surfaced through a leaked internal memo from the Mann family's media team, labeled Image Priority Protocol, TM Recovery. The memo's tone was cold and corporate, its message chillingly clear. Avoid the word paralysis. Reuse fitness footage to maintain strength narrative. Limit Portia visibility across all channels. In other words, craft the illusion that Tamela was still whole, still triumphant, still marketable. And so, the illusion persisted. Fan accounts began reposting old clips of Tamela at the gym, smiling and lifting weights, as if time itself had paused at her peak. Yet in reality, Tamela was now in a secluded rehabilitation facility undergoing spinal regeneration therapy. She was reportedly unable to feed herself or hold a pen. One widely circulated devotional video, praised by fans for its comforting message, was later exposed as AI-generated. According to sources close to the family, Tamela's voice had been licensed through a 2019 contract, allowing the creation of audio content using her past recordings. The gospel industry's most unholy transaction. Behind every scripture-laced social media post and branded healing event lay a gospel enterprise driven not by divine intervention, but by bottom-line profits. A second whistleblower, this time a former employee within Tamela's touring team, stepped forward with documentation that laid bare the commercialization of her illness. One particularly disturbing document was titled Post-Surgery Bounce Back Campaign. It outlined a series of events, social media rollouts, and even VIP healing experiences that would accompany Tamela's supposed recovery journey, complete with sponsor logos and tiered pricing for audience interactions. The campaign was scheduled to roll out within weeks of her final surgery, despite doctors privately advising that Tamela's prognosis remained uncertain. The branding team was preparing to sell a resurrection before even confirming survival. Meanwhile, Portia, now a pariah within her own household, began facing legal threats. A public relations executive associated with the family warned her that her videos and statements were damaging to brand equity. A cease and desist letter soon followed. The irony was bitter. While her mother lay fragile and voiceless, those around her worried more about sponsorship contracts than soul care. The legacy that Tamela had built, through song, sacrifice, and spiritual leadership, was now being leveraged against the one person fighting to protect her humanity. This was no longer a story of a mother and daughter at odds. It was the unveiling of an empire willing to sacrifice its queen to maintain its illusion of strength. Manufactured miracles and fabricated faith. As Portia's outcry gained momentum, the attempts to maintain the family's image grew increasingly desperate. One by one, layers of performance peeled away. Tamela's once beloved prayer line, which had fallen silent earlier in the year, suddenly resumed, but not with her voice. Instead, listeners were greeted by the Spirit Team, a group of pre-selected speakers reading Tamela's past quotes and devotionals, presenting them as if they were live and current. One message particularly stood out. Tamela knows the Lord is moving her legs again. But that wasn't a statement made by any physician. It was, as one insider put it, spiritual hope weaponized for brand control. Disillusionment began to set in. A fan-run Instagram page posted a side-by-side video comparison. Tamela walking proudly on stage in 2004 and her being wheeled into a private medical center in June 2025. Her head bowed, face pale and drawn. The caption read, "Why are we being lied to?" The post went viral, fueling hashtags like #where is Tamela and #let Portia speak. Former colleagues, including longtime backup singers and production staff, began posting cryptic messages. "The truth will come out. One daughter already started. The rest of us are praying about how to join her." It became evident that Portia's lone voice had pierced a wall of fear, and that others, too, had borne witness to a silent tragedy behind the curtain. Cracks in the empire, confessions and consequences. The unraveling accelerated when a former choir director spoke anonymously in a church podcast. Voice cracking with emotion, she recalled nights when Tamela was barely able to stand backstage. She'd whisper, "I'm so tired," and David would say, "Just one more song, baby, they need to hear you." That phrase, "just one more song," was echoed by several former band members, stagehands, and technicians. One recalled that special braces were built into the stage risers to hold her upright during key performances. Reinforced mic stands were used to disguise her waning strength. "We did what we were told," said one stage tech, and orders always came from David's team. The sentiment was echoed by many who had remained silent out of loyalty or fear of retaliation. Then came the most painful shift of all. The churches began to distance themselves. Without fanfare or public explanation, several megachurches removed Tamela and Friends tour dates from their calendars. Others quietly dropped promotional materials. One prominent Atlanta pastor, speaking off record, said, "We were told she was on the mend, fully capable of performing. But once we saw Portia's video, we couldn't support the deception anymore. We had to choose integrity over influence." The silence of the gospel institutions, the very places where truth, love, and healing were supposed to thrive, became its own indictment. Their quiet exits and cautious emails spoke louder than any sermon. The legal reckoning and the fight for truth. As public scrutiny intensified, legal consequences loomed. A leaked court document, intended for internal review but mistakenly sent to a reporter, revealed that David Mann's legal counsel was preparing for possible inquiries into medical misrepresentation, unauthorized branding practices, and even the misappropriation of ministry funds. There were concerns about how church donations were being used to fund promotional wellness events and whether Tamela herself had knowingly consented to her image being used in these ventures. In parallel, Portia and her father had not exchanged words in over 3 months. Their estrangement was no longer just familial. It had become emblematic of a deeper divide. A daughter fighting for transparency and compassion versus a patriarchal structure prioritizing contracts and legacy protection. As of July 2025, Tamela Mann remains in a private medical facility. Her condition is described as stable but unresponsive, according to sources close to the family. Public updates continue through scheduled social posts, none of which clearly state her status. Some are believed to be pre-written, while others may be curated by her digital media team with little to no input from Tamela herself. This isn't just a crisis of misinformation or a tale of a fractured family. It is a moral reckoning. At its core lies a haunting question. When your voice is used without your will, your pain is hidden for profit, and the people you trusted become gatekeepers of a lie. Who will speak your truth? The daughter who chose truth over image. Portia. Mann never signed up to be a whistleblower. She was never part of the industry machinery or a polished spokesperson for her family's brand. She was simply a daughter, grieving, exhausted, and unwilling to watch her mother's suffering be turned into a business model. In a now-deleted Instagram Live, she told a friend, "If speaking up ruins their perfect image, so be it. I'd rather have a broken family than a broken mother." That line hit like a psalm of defiance. It echoed across timelines and testimonies, picking up resonance in homes, churches, and hearts. Portia was not trying to destroy a legacy. She was trying to preserve what mattered, her mother's humanity. Now the dominoes are falling. One by one, more insiders are stepping forward. Former choir members, spiritual advisors, and even pastors are beginning to acknowledge the truth behind the carefully managed curtain. One preacher who had long collaborated with David Mann issued a public statement. "I've seen miracles. I've also seen betrayal. This isn't just a family drama. It's a reckoning for the gospel community." A sudden erasure. Silence in the sanctuary. Overnight, something chilling unfolded in Dallas. One of the city's most influential megachurches, long considered a stronghold of support for Tamela Mann, quietly removed her from their lineup. Her anticipated keynote at an upcoming faith conference was replaced with a generic Women of Worship panel. No explanation, no dedication, not even a moment of prayer. Her image was stripped from promotional materials, her name scrubbed from the schedule like she had never been part of the gospel movement at all. The silence spoke louder than any sermon. It sent a clear, unsettling message, one that rippled across social media, faith communities, and longtime fans alike. The industry was choosing its bottom line over the woman who helped build its foundation. In a realm where faith is often marketed with the gloss of perfection, truth is inconvenient, especially when it threatens the brand. And Tamela, once the poster child for miraculous transformation, had become a liability too complicated to acknowledge. A reverent rebellion. Ammon Hart speaks out. Into that silence stepped Reverend Ammon Hart. A nationally syndicated preacher, author, and longtime colleague of the Mann family, Hart did what few dared. He spoke the truth, raw and unvarnished. In a video statement filmed without studio lighting or teleprompters, Hart looked directly into the camera and let his heart lead. "I've seen miracles. I've seen betrayal," he began, voice steady but thick with emotion. "But what we're witnessing now isn't just a controversy, it's a reckoning. The truth is not a buzzword. It's not branding. It's sacred, and it's being ignored." Then, with sobering urgency, he said what many were afraid to voice. "Listen to Porsche, because if we don't, we are complicit." The video ignited the gospel internet like fire on dry brush. It was shared over 500,000 times within a day. For the gospel community, this wasn't a clip. It was a war cry. Hart had put his reputation on the line, calling out the machinery of spiritual commerce that prioritized appearances over actual healing. And in doing so, he gave language to the unease so many felt but hadn't dared speak aloud. A house. Divided, faith, family, and fallout. The fallout didn't stop at headlines or lawsuits. It tore through the Mann family like a spiritual earthquake. Once held up as gospel's royal household, a model of unity, love, and divine order, the family now found itself splintered by grief, silence, and conflicting loyalties. Tamela's sister, known to fans simply as Aunt Liz, broke the unspoken family silence on Instagram Live. Her appearance was emotionally raw, her voice quivering as she whispered, "I support my niece's right to speak, but I also believe my brother meant well. He's broken too." Her words, though intended to bridge a chasm, only highlighted how wide it had grown. Cousins who had shared stages and pulpit appearances quietly unfollowed one another. Family group chats that once buzzed with prayers and praise reports dissolved into either aching silence or hostile confrontations. Holidays, once filled with song, worship, and harmony, became tense reminders of what was lost. Not just a shared narrative, but a shared understanding of truth. The media, particularly faith-based bloggers and YouTube evangelists, turned Portia's voice memos into case studies of righteous dissent. Unlike the gossip-fueled coverage of secular tabloids, These faith-driven commentators offered her story with the reverence of a testimony. Portia wasn't merely a whistleblower. She was a daughter grieving out loud, pulling the curtain back on an empire that looked perfect on television but fractured behind the scenes. Her words weren't attacks. They were elegies for a mother who, in her suffering, had been reduced to a spectacle. Portia's pain illuminated a deeper rot. How often the gospel industry had celebrated survival stories while ignoring those still in the fire. The man's inner struggle became a mirror for countless other families navigating fame, faith, and fracture. A gospel reformation. Outrage becomes organizing. What began as shock turned into action. A growing coalition of pastors, gospel musicians, social workers, and civil rights activists banded together to launch a campaign titled Tamela's Law, a proposed legislative framework designed to provide safeguards for artists within the gospel and faith-based performance industries. The proposal was bold: mandatory recovery periods for artists post-surgery, complete transparency in any health-related marketing campaigns, and legally binding requirements for family consent when using a person's name or likeness in monetized products or promotions. For years, artists had quietly endured emotional and physical breakdowns behind the scenes while maintaining glowing appearances for audiences who only saw the final praise break. "If we don't learn from Tamela's suffering," said one advocate during a community town hall, "then we're dooming every artist to be cheered on stage and forgotten in the hospital." The momentum behind Tamela's Law extended beyond legal language. Churches began re-evaluating their relationships with touring artists, implementing wellness clauses and mental health resources. Record labels and production companies were pressured to develop ethical contracts that protected not just their investments but their talent's dignity. Though critics called the movement reactionary, many supporters saw it as redemptive, a long overdue reckoning with the unchecked commodification of spirituality. Gospel, after all, was supposed to be good news. But how good could it be if it left its messengers broken in the process? Conclusion: truth that trembles, not trends. Tamela Mann remains hospitalized. Updates on her condition are scarce, filtered through cautious press releases and ambiguous Instagram posts. David Mann, once seen as her protector and spiritual partner, now finds himself under a cloud of suspicion, not only from the media but from members of his own family. Portia stands alone in her truth. Her bravery is evident, but so is her solitude. Many applaud her for speaking out, calling her a prophetess of accountability in an age of image management. Yet her isolation serves as a stark reminder that those who tell uncomfortable truths are often left to carry them alone. Churches that once promoted Miracle Mondays and Faith-Forward Fridays using Tamela's face have quietly scrubbed her image from their promotional materials. Some issued formal apologies, others offered vague acknowledgments of miscommunications. But as Porsche said, captions don't heal broken spines. Hashtags can't reduce inflammation. And viral sympathy doesn't bring justice. The damage done is spiritual and existential. A betrayal not only of a person but of a people who believed they were part of something sacred. The scandal is not limited to one woman's hospitalization. It's a mirror reflecting an entire culture built on the monetization of miracles and the erasure of suffering. Portia Mann did not merely lift the veil, she ripped it off. Her revelations challenge not only individuals but systems. She asks uncomfortable questions. What happens when worship becomes a business? When healing is advertised before it's real? When faith is sold, but accountability is silenced? In a culture that too often markets perfection, Portia's voice reminded the world that honesty is holy too. And sometimes telling the truth is the most sacred act of all. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe for more valuable updates.